This presentation will explore some of the key ideas in Emily Dickinson's poem from 1865, As Imperceptibly as Grief. As imperceptibly as grief, the summer lapsed away, too imperceptible at last to seem like perfidy, a quietness distilled, as twilight long begun, or nature spending with herself sequestered afternoon. The dusk drew earlier in, the morning foreign shone, a courteous yet harrowing grace, as guest that would be gone. And thus, without a wing or service of a keel, our summer made her light escape into the beautiful. Dickinson's poem is about the passing of time. It's about solitude, it's about loss, it's about grief and sadness, but it's also about finding a certain peacefulness in that sadness and a comfort in the constant, consistent, slow movement onwards through emotions which are sometimes difficult to articulate. Imperceptibly means unnoticeably. Lapsed means faded. Perfidy means betrayal, and distilled means purified or concentrated. Twilight is sunset, it's the movement from day to night. Sequestered means isolated and separated. Dusk means twilight and sunset. Courteous means polite and formal. Harrowing means disturbing. A keel is the thing underneath a boat that helps steer it, and that I think is it for vocabulary that might be challenging. We almost don't notice the first line. The second line overwrites it. We'll come back to it at the end. Let's say that it begins with summer leaving and fading, and it does so gradually and slowly. So here she's exploring the idea that happiness, summer, sunshine won't last. She capitalizes some of the key ideas, some of the significant emotions that she's exploring, grief and summer, and we see how often the ideas balance each other out with sadness and happiness paired up together. Whilst initially we might think this is going to be an optimistic poem, that her sadness has gradually, imperceptibly faded away, that's replaced with a sadder, more sombre idea that summer won't last. We know that Dickinson is preoccupied by death. We know that she suffered a lot of loss in her life, and that she withdrew from society. And the tone of melancholy is set and echoes that knowledge that we have of her biography. Perhaps she's noting that the sadness she felt for lost loved ones doesn't last, but perhaps she's also suggesting that life is short and brief and passing. In lines 3 and 4, she says that if she'd noticed it going, she might have felt betrayed by it. Perfidy is deception, but it went so gradually that she didn't notice it going, and so she didn't feel betrayed by it. Notice at the ends of line 2 and 4 those hyphens indicating a pause or a silence. You get the impression this is someone trying to articulate and explore difficult emotions, and the words have become distilled and concentrated themselves, and they are bracketed and surrounded by silence, which is fitting for a poem which is about loss and about sadness. The sounds in her chosen diction slow this poem down a quietness distilled. You can't rush it. It's those sibilant sounds and those drawn out vowels. And again, it's appropriate for a poem which is about mourning, about regret. The quietness that she seems to almost seek out has been intensified, distilled, and purified. She is alone. She is experiencing solitude. The day is ending and is moving into the evening as twilight long begun. And again, it's drawn out, it's long begun. None of these changes that she's experiencing are happening dramatically. They're happening gradually and slowly. These lines evoke the quiet of twilight when perhaps the birds have stopped singing. Nature is isolating, sequestering herself. She's been personified as a female spending an afternoon in isolation, much like Dickinson spent time alone, looking out onto images of nature which reminded her of her loss. As summer fades, the evenings start to get darker, earlier, and morning becomes something foreign, so something she doesn't know, something far away. The capitalisation of dusk and morning suggests that they represent more than times of day, suggests that they evoke ideas of transition from one state of mind to another. And that's picked up in that image of twilight as well, an image of being on a threshold, being in between states. She's neither happy nor sad. It's not the day, it's not the evening. She's exploring this process of moving through time as her emotions move from one stage to another. Both of these lines again have that pause on the end. She's exploring, it's contemplative, it's somber, and it's punctuated by silence. She describes experiencing the feeling or emotion of grace. So she's blessed by it, she's saved by it, but it's formal to her, it's polite, it's courteous, and it's also harrowing, so it's disturbing and it's unsettling. Either way, this feeling that comes that sort of graces her with her presence wants to leave her. And notice again, this is a poem about isolation, about her being alone, wanting to be left alone. But this is also about emotions leaving her as well. So although the summer has been leaving, although the day is turning into evening, so far we've also had this harrowing grace that's going to leave. Just like in the first line, we had her grief which is leaving. And there's a comfort to be found in time moving forward. And so she repeats the idea of summer leaving, and it leaves without a wing or service of a keel. So it has no direction, it has nothing to steer it, it just fades. This time we have a caesura after thus, just emphasising that sibilant sound and underlining the silence that permeates the whole poem, and the idea of things leaving. Without this, she is ending up more and more alone. And in the final lines she reiterates again, third time, fourth time, that summer is departing. But notice the nuanced shifts in the final lines. It's our summer. There was another here. There was someone else. Was this someone that died? Is this someone who left her? They shared the summer, and it made a light escape. Into the light, is that a religious term, moving into heaven or some sort of enlightenment? A person who needs to escape from her. There's a hint of low self-worth there. But that last line, where does it go? It goes into the beautiful. There are consolations in this poem. There are comforts to be found. In the same way that in those opening lines, grief doesn't endure, sadness doesn't endure, it will give way to other feelings. That actually here, that last word to end on something beautiful is a undeniably optimistic lift at the end of what could have been quite a sombre poem. So there we have it, a beautifully crafted poem which explores difficult emotions and which explores how challenging it can be to articulate difficult emotions, but that also finds some consolation in the idea that time will pass, that emotions will move on, and that there is consolation and comfort to be found in nature. You'll find as you link Dickinson's writing to context that you tend to refer to the biographical elements of her work, her seclusion, her isolation, her preoccupation with death. You might also add in this notion that her work was rarely published during her life. She was a female poet, and it was far more challenging for a female to have their words seen, and so it adds a very personal element to her writing. The few poems that were read were shared with friends or with lovers or with family or in diaries, and I think that comes through in the very, very personal tone. You'll find yourself describing the tone of Dickinson as contemplative or exploratory or intimate or sombre, and her work is compared along the themes of nature and time and isolation and death, and as such she will link very well with Afternoons, with Death of a Naturalist, with Prelude, with any of the nature poems, as well as others. Thanks very much for listening.